in capital city Accra. Demonstrators clad in red and white T-shirts carried placards with inscriptions such as "We need justice in the election." The NDC alleges discrepancies, including illegal name transfers, missing voters, and the inclusion of the names of over 50,000 dead people. NDC Director of Elections, Dr. Omani Boama, said an independent audit of the electoral roll is the only way to ensure transparency and fairness in the electoral process. He says his party has suggested the Electoral Commission allow the UN Development Program to facilitate the process, but that this idea was rejected. The Electoral Commission has said calls for an audit are misguided and unnecessary, but the opposition warns that thousands of registered voters risk being disenfranchised if errors persist. Ghana goes to the polls in December 2024 in a two-horse race between John Mahama, an opposition candidate, and former president and current vice president Mahamudu Buwamia. Both candidates are promising to fix the country's poor economic situation. Withdrawal of U.S. troops from Niger is complete, an American official said. A small number of military personnel assigned to guard the U.S. embassy remain, Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh told reporters. Earlier this year, Niger's ruling junta ended an agreement that allowed U.S. troops to operate in the West African country. 2 months later, officials from both countries said in a joint statement that U.S. troops would complete their withdrawal by the middle of September. The U.S. handed over its last military bases in Niger to local authorities last month, but about 24 American soldiers had remained in Niger, largely for administrative duties related to the withdrawal, Singh said. Niger's ouster of American troops following a coup last year has brought ramifications for Washington because it's forcing troops to abandon critical bases that were used for counter-terrorism missions in the Sahel. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group operates in a vast region south of the Sahara Desert. One of those groups, Jama'a Nusrat-ul-Islam wa al-Muslimin, known as JNIM, is active in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and is looking to expand into Benin and Togo. Niger had been seen as one of the last nations in the restive region that Western nations could partner with to beat back growing jihadi insurgencies. The U.S. and France had more than 2,500 military personnel in the region until recently, and together with other European countries had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in military assistance and training. In recent months, Niger has pulled away from its Western partners, turning instead to Russia for security. In April, Russian military trainers arrived in Niger to reinforce the country's air defenses. Gunfire was heard in Bamako, Mali's capital, early on Tuesday morning at around 5:30 GMT. Residents reported the fire coming from the airport or near the Gendarmerie, prompting people heading to the mosques for morning prayers to turn back. A security source said gunfire was heard in several neighborhoods, including areas close to the main Modibo Keita International Airport. Another security source said the airport had been closed. Mali is one of several West African countries fighting an Islamic insurgency that took roots in Mali's arid north in 2012 and has since spread across the Sahel and more recently to the north of coastal countries. Thousands have been killed and millions displaced in the region amid the militants' advance and military efforts to push them back, with governments and fighters accused of violence against civilians. ATN gathered that frustration against the authorities for failing to restore security contributed to 2 coups in Mali in 2020 and 2021, followed by 2 in neighboring Burkina Faso and 1 in Niger. But jihadist attacks have escalated despite the junta's promises to improve security, including by replacing alliances with Western countries with Russian support, including mercenaries from Russia's Wagner private army. Experienced Wagner fighters were killed at the end of July during a battle between Tuareg rebels and the Malian army, which suffered heavy losses and was ambushed by jihadists as it withdrew. Zimbabwe plans to cull 200 elephants to feed communities facing acute hunger after the worst drought in 4 decades, while said on Tuesday. El Nino-induced drought in southern Africa caused food shortages impacting people. Zimbabwe Parks and Wildfire Authority plans to cull 200 elephants, distributing meat to affected communities. The cull, the first in the country since 19 is in Hange, Mbire, Sholosho, and Shiretzi districts. It follows neighboring Namibia's decision last month to cull 83 elephants and distribute meat to people impacted by the drought. More than 200,000 elephants are estimated to live in a conservation area spread over 5 southern African countries: Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Angola, and Namibia, making the region home to one of the largest elephant populations worldwide. Zimbabwe is calling its over 84,000 elephants to decongest its parks, which can despite the country's vast elephant population. Farao emphasized that the culling is part of a larger effort to combat drought. With such a severe drought, human-wildlife conflicts can escalate as resources become scarcer. Last year, Zimbabwe lost 50 people to elephant attacks. The country, which is lauded for its conservation efforts and growing its elephant population, has been lobbying the UN's Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species to reopen trade of ivory and live elephants. With one of the largest elephant populations, Zimbabwe has about $600,000 worth of ivory stockpiles, which it cannot sell. South Sudan and Sudan have made progress towards restarting the pumping of South Sudan's crude oil through a pipeline running to a port in its neighbor. South Sudan's finance minister and the president's office said the main oil pipeline from South Sudan to Sudan for export was halted due to damage from a war between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces, causing environmental contamination and high food prices in Sudan, where millions face extreme hunger. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has confirmed that South Sudanese engineers have completed the necessary technical preparations for resuming oil production. Engineers from South Sudan are expected to visit Sudan in the coming weeks to familiarize themselves with the facility's readiness for production. Both sides are working on an operational plan to restart oil flows, according to report. South Sudan's economy has been under pressure in recent years amid communal violence, with revenue having dwindled since a 2013-2018 civil war, and more recently exports disruptions due to war in neighboring Sudan. South Sudan have been sending about 150,000 barrels per day of crude through Sudan for export under a formula established when South Sudan gained independence from Khartoum in 2011. Taking most of oil production with it. At its peak before the civil war, South Sudan's crude oil production stood at 350,000 to 400,000 barrels per day. Rescuers continuing to search for more survivors after a 7-story building collapsed in the capital, Freetown, killing at least 8 people. The West African country's National Disaster Management Agency said 6 people had been rescued from the rubble and Shell New Road so far, but more people remained trapped. It added that some of those in the rubble had been able to communicate their locations to the rescuers. The building in Eastern Freetown collapsed between 11 and 12 local time on Monday, the NDMA said. 2 girls and a boy, all aged under 5, are among the victims. 2 cranes have been brought in to help the rescue teams, who were earlier seen using picks and their bare hands to try to clear the wreckage. Local resident Mohammed Kamara wept as he told news agency that his wife and 3 children were trapped in the rubble. The cause of the collapse is being investigated. The building was used for both residential and commercial purposes, according to initial assessments conducted by the NDMA. The agency's head, Brima Sese, stressed the need to raise public awareness about the risks associated with using unqualified contractors and substandard building materials. He also said his agency will continue conducting vulnerability assessments to help reduce the frequency of building collapse across the country. Sheen Cuffs, a struggling hip-hop mogul, has been arrested in New York City on unspecified federal charges following raids on his properties in March as part of an ongoing sex trafficking investigation. Sheen Cuffs, a musician accused of sexual assault and abuse, has been arrested in connection with an ongoing U.S. Homeland Security investigation. The arrest was made based on a sealed indictment filed by the SDNY. Combs faces several civil lawsuits, including allegations of raping an underage girl and grooming a producer. However, his attorney expressed disappointment with the prosecution's decision. Sheen Combs, a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist, is facing legal issues after 2 women filed lawsuits alleging abuse and assault against him. Combs denies the allegations and calls them a money grab. Combs have faced multiple civil lawsuits, including one involving a 17-year-old woman who was sexually trafficked. His former producer, Rodney Jones Jr., filed a lawsuit accusing Combs. Combs denied the allegation. Rap mogul Combs, also known as Puffy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Love and Brother Love, a court before the New York Adult Survivors Act's expiration, allowing victims to file claims even after the statute of limits. Tropical rainstorm has flooded parts of North Carolina near the coast in the water. Video shows one young man paddling through high waters. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Atlas 14 shows that 12 inches of rain fell in 12 hours. The average occurs every 200 years, according to the National Weather Service. U.S. Secret Service says it's aware of a social media post by Elon Musk in which he says that to assassinate President Joe Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris. Has since deleted the post and said it was intended as a joke. His post on X, formerly Twitter, came just hours after the suspected attempted assassination of Donald Trump at his golf course in Florida on Sunday. The tech billionaire is a close ally of Trump, who has vowed to enlist Mr. Musk to run a government efficiency commission if he wins a second term as U.S. president. X users criticized Elon Musk's comments, claiming they were incitement against the U.S. president and vice president. The White House condemned the rhetoric, stating that violence should only be condemned. The U.S. Secret Service acknowledged the post, but stated that they will investigate all threats related to their practice. The Musk, after deleting the humorous post on X, states that jokes are less funny if people don't know the context and if the delivery is in plain text. The controversial tech mogul is considered ally of Trump and formally endorsed him in the aftermath of a separate assassination attempt against the former president that took place at a rally on 13 July in Butler, Pennsylvania. In that attempt, the suspect fired multiple rounds, injuring Trump and killing an attendee at the rally. Since then, Mr. Musk has often tweeted or reposted messages critical of both Biden and Harris and in support of Trump. A man hid for 12 hours in bushes before Donald Trump played golf at his West Palm Beach club. This is the second attempt to assassinate the former president in as many months. Trump and his friend Steve Witkoff arrived at the course when a member of his protection detail spotted a rifle poking out of foliage. Trump was evacuated unharmed and reported hearing probably 4 or 5 shots ring out in the near distance. A Secret Service agent opened fire on a suspect 300 to 500 yards away from President Trump at a golf course. The suspect was concealed by shrubbery and palm trees and had been lurking there since 1:59 local time. The suspect was equipped with 2 digital cameras, a black plastic bag of food, and an SKS-style semi-automatic rifle and a scope to magnify its length, according to report. The Republican presidential candidate's last publicly scheduled campaign event had been on Saturday evening on the other side of the country in the state of Utah. Residents say Trump spends almost every Sunday at the West Palm Beach Golf Club when he's not on the campaign trail. But Secret Service Director Ronald Rouet said on Monday that the president was not even really supposed to go there, so agents had to put together a security plan at the last minute. A man named Ryan Rouse, a Hawaii resident with a criminal history, has been charged with 1 count of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and 1 count of possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. The suspect, who allegedly planned to target Trump, allegedly knew the former president would be coming to play golf and went undetected for so long. The suspect's motive for allegedly planning to target Trump has not been revealed, but he had previously voted for Trump's West Palm Beach golf course has been surrounded by security measures, raising concerns about potential life threats. Residents believe a conspiracy alerted the suspect. Authorities claim the entire golf course would have been surrounded if Trump was a sitting president. President Biden has called for increased funding for the Secret Service as former agents have faced scrutiny and are short on resources. Canada's ruling Liberal Party lost a once-safe seat in a Montreal parliamentary constituency, preliminary results shown on Tuesday, a result likely to put more pressure on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to quit. Liberal candidate Laura Palestini lost to separatist Black Quebecois candidate Louis Philippe Sauvé in La Salle Amadaverdum, receiving 27.2% of the vote. The election was held to replace a Liberal legislator who quit, focusing on Trudeau's political future. Liberal leader Trudeau plans to lead the party into an election by October 2025, but some lawmakers are calling for change. The Liberals won the Montreal seats in the 2021 general election with 43% of the vote. Polls suggest the Liberals will face strong opposition in the next federal election, with Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives having 45% public support. Trudeau's popularity has sagged as voters struggle with a surge in the cost of living and a housing crisis that has been fueled in part by a spike in arrivals of temporary residents, including foreign students and workers. Poilievre is threatening to axe a federal carbon tax and cap immigration limits for more homes. Liberals who portray him as a supporter of Trump's Make America Great Again movement. Poilievre also plans to defund CBC, Canada's public broadcaster. Mexico's judicial reform has raised investors' concerns about law, rule, and government institutions, but analysts suggest buying opportunities may arise due to the country's economic turmoil and political turmoil. The Senate passed a reform last week aiming to change the structure of judicial power by shifting judges' appointments from executive nomination to popular elections. The Morena-led government, which won a landslide victory for President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum, aims to address corruption and inefficiencies in the justice system. Critics argue the reform could politicize the administration administration and drive away investors with institutional uncertainty, posing U.S. election, U.S. growth, and Mexico risks. Mexico's equity market is down over 9% this year, with dollar bond spreads wider than Latin American peers. The Mexican peso has hit a 2-year low and is on track for its largest yearly decline since 2016. Citi has a target of 21 pesos per dollar over the next month. The judicial reform signals Mexico's institutional fragility, putting commercial partners, capital flow, and economic growth at risk. Mexico's economy could be affected by judicial reforms, which could potentially undermine institutional quality and Mexico's checks and balances. Critics warn that these reforms could impact key projects and could be felt beyond Mexico's borders. XP Investment senior strategist Marco Oviedo suggests that these reforms may contravene the USMCA and agreement, which is up for review in 2026. The Economy Ministry assures newsmen that the reform does not contravene USMCA obligations. Mexico's rule of law has been perceived as low for decades, but concerns over democracy and politically compromised cuts have not deterred investment in low-cost manufacturing locations like China, Vietnam, Morocco, and Bangladesh. Mexican stocks are bullish due to valuation multiples, positives, real interest rates, and recent underperformance. The president-elect may implement fiscal adjustments or delay judicial reform, potentially creating an entry point for investors. President Nicolas Maduro's government escalated repressive tactics to crush peaceful protests and keep power after Venezuela's disputed election in July, a UN report said on Tuesday. Electoral authorities awarded the vote to Maduro without showing all tallies, but the opposition said its candidate Edmundo Gonzalez won by a landslide, with counts proving that. More than 24 people died in protests, with 2,400 arrested. The UN fact-finding mission, who interviewed several hundred people remotely or in third countries as it is denied access to Venezuela, said authorities tried to dismantle the opposition. According to the mission, 24 out of 25 deaths were caused by gunshot wounds, mostly to the neck. Arrest under the feared knock-knock operation, referring to the unexpected arrival at House of Government critics, often affected ordinary citizens in poor neighborhoods. The Maduro government has blamed right-wing foreign instigated extremists and fascists for the latest bout of violence in the South American oil producer that has seen waves of protests crushed during his more than decade-long rule. There was no immediate statement from Venezuelan authorities in response to the UN. In response to the UN mission, which said it had tried to contact them for investigation to no avail. The UN report reveals that repression in Venezuela during the election was orchestrated by Maduro, deteriorating the rule of law. Public authorities abandoned independence, creating a fear climate. Allegations of disappearances, torture, and cruel treatment have increased since 2019. A massive pipeline explosion occurred in Deer Park, Texas, after a vehicle drove through a fence and struck an above-ground valve. Police and FBI agents are investigating, but no reports suggest a coordinated or terrorist attack. Investigations focus on the driver's condition. Nearly 1,000 homes in Deer Park were evacuated after a natural gas pipeline fire lasted over 12 hours. Firefighters were dispatched after an explosion at a valve station in the area, which rattled homes and businesses, including a Walmart. The fire continued even after putting a lot of water on them. Initial shelter orders include at schools. A fire in Deer Park, California, caused by a pipeline explosion injured people, including a firefighter. Officials reported that only one person sustained a minor injury, and 20 miles of pipeline between closed valves had to be burned off before the fire stopped. The explosion sounded like a bomb, and everyone inside was rushed to the back of the store and taken to a community center, according to report. Houston, Texas is known for its petrochemical industry with frequent explosions and fires. Petroleum engineer Professor Ramanan Krishmanomurthy suggests allowing fires to burn out for environmental reasons as it releases volatile organics. However, negative environmental consequences included soot, carbons, and organic material. Energy Transfer, the pipeline's owner, is monitoring the area for potential hazards. Harris County Pollution Control confirmed no volatile organic compounds were detected in a fire that burned through nearby power lines, causing several thousand customers to lose power. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is monitoring the air, and the Railroad Commission of Texas is investigating safety inspectors. The fire is not expected to disrupt supply chains, and some residents are relying on generators to stay cool. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We'll be back after the short break. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to the broadcast of the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We are open for adverts, placements, bookings, and commercials. And you can connect with us and watch us on ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, X, formerly Twitter, at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website at atlanticnetwork.tv. And now to the rest of our stories. Indian opposition leader Arvind Kejriwal picked Delhi Minister Atishi to replace him as Chief Minister of the Capital Territory on Tuesday, allowing him to focus on winning a fresh mandate in elections due next year after getting bail in a graft case. Atishi, 43 years old, who uses only one name, is a founding member of the decade-old Aam Aadmi Party AAP that rose to national prominence after emerging out of an anti-corruption movement led by Kejriwal, a fierce critic of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. She has been a leading face of AAP and the Delhi government after Kejriwal, 56 years old, was arrested and detained in prison in March in a corruption case he calls politically motivated. Kejriwal was granted bail on Friday by Indian Supreme Court, almost 6 months after being detained in connection with alleged corruption in the capital city's liquor sales policy. Kejriwal and AAP denied the allegations. After his release, Kejriwal said he will resign as chief minister to focus on campaigning for elections for Delhi's assembly due to be held by mid-February. AAP leader said Kejriwal would submit his resignation to Delhi's lieutenant governor later on Tuesday. Kejriwal said he would return as chief minister only if people certify his honesty by voting for him and his party, indicating that analysts said it's a strategy to seek votes on the ground that he has been wrongly targeted. Kejriwal was arrested weeks before national elections, prompting the opposition to accuse Modi and his Bharatiya Janata Party (BJP) government of denying them a level playing field as Modi sought a record third straight term. Modi and BJP denied the accusations and said law enforcement agencies were only doing their job. Last week, BJP said bail to Kejriwal did not mean he was innocent. Indonesia's key parliamentary budget committee approved on Tuesday increased spending for the incoming government of President-elect Prabowo Subianto, who is set to take office next month. The committee approved a 6% rise in spending to 3,621.31 trillion rupiah versus an estimate of 3,412.2 trillion rupiah in 2024, its chair said. The budget accommodates key programs of the new government, including a free meal policy for kids, which will cost 71 trillion rupiah, free health checkups, building hospitals and renovating schools, and food security initiatives. Prabowo sees these programs as necessary to help meet his target of lifting economic growth to 8% from 5%. A wider parliamentary vote scheduled for Thursday, September 19, to approve the committee's decision is still needed, though it usually endorses the decision. The country's 2025 fiscal deficit was maintained at 2.53% of GDP, smaller than this year's outlook at 2.70%, as revenues are expected to rise by 7.2% to 3,005.1 trillion next year. Prabowo aims to increase Indonesia's tax to GDP ratio to 18% from around 10% through the establishment of a specialized body or state revenue agency. In its maiden budget, the revenue target from taxes, customs and excises was set at 2,490.91 trillion rupiah in 2025, 12.3% more than the 2,218.4 million rupiah expected to be raised this year. The revenue target does not factor in a potential value-added tax rate increase to 12% current year at 11%, the committee chair said, adding that the hike will be discussed again between the state and parliament next year. BMI, a unit of Fitch Solutions, said in its September 5th report that Prabowo's fiscal targets are too ambitious, saying the deficit forecast might widen to 2.8% or near the legal ceiling at 3% due to potentially higher spending. The approved budget assumes the economy will grow 5.2% next year, just above 5.1% in the current year's outlook, while inflation is expected to be maintained at 2.5% for 2025. Prabowo will start his 5-year term on October 20th. Former Kashmiri independence advocate Hafiz Mohammed Sikandar Malik filed nomination papers for the Jammu and Kashmir election, the first since India revoked semi-autonomy. He is one of 10 candidates contesting the local legislature election. Former separatists have called for India to reinstate Jammu and Kashmir's semi-autonomy, despite New Delhi's rejection. The region has been at the center of animosity between India and Pakistan since 1947. In 2019, Modi brought it under New Delhi rule, detaining separatist leaders. Malik is contesting the poll, which will run until October, as an independent because New Delhi banned his Jamaat-e-Islami Jal party in 2019, accusing it of supporting militancy in the disputed region. Jamaat started boycotting elections in 1987, claiming that they were rigged to favor parties that had New Delhi's backing, and the federal government has denied the charges, according to reports. The National Conference and the People's Democratic Two regional rivals have pledged to restore partial autonomy in Jammu and Kashmir. However, Modi's Interior Minister Amit Shah criticized the region's semi-autonomous status as history. The BJP, which has little presence in the Muslim-majority Kashmir Valley, is expected to contest 62 seats in the upcoming elections. National rival Congress is allied with Abdullah's National Conference Party, while independents led by Abdul Rashid Sheikh have formed the Awami League Party. If Rashid wins, he plans to demand Kashmir's autonomy. Sayyar Ahmed Rashid, a former Jamaat leader, believes elections are the only way to fight injustice. Malaysian authorities have frozen almost 100 bank accounts linked to an Islamic business group being investigated for suspected child abuse, a senior police official said on Tuesday. Authorities are investigating Global Equine Services and Business, GISB, for allegedly running charity homes from which police last week rescued more than 400 children and youth. Police said many showed signs of sexual abuse and neglect. The bank accounts held a total of more than 580,000 ringgit, and the company is now being investigated for alleged money laundering as well as religious offenses. The Inspector General of Police, Razaruddin Hassan, told reporters. GISB did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The company had initially said it did not run the charity homes and denied all allegations of abuse, but then its chief executive said on Saturday that GISB had broken unspecified laws, that there were 1 or 2 cases of sodomy at the youth homes. Razaruddin said 4 of the 96 bank accounts that had been frozen were now shut, and that police had also seized 8 vehicles belonging to the company. Authorities have said they will summon GISB's top management for questioning in the case, which has sparked outrage in Muslim-majority Malaysia and puts the spotlight on the company's roots in a religious sect outlawed by the government 3 decades ago. In a Facebook post on Tuesday, Malaysia's King Sultan Ibrahim, who acts as the custodian of Islam in the country, called for a thorough investigation into the case and for swift action to be taken against any wrongdoers. Vietnam is preparing for more flooding, with a tropical depression forecast to strengthen into a storm as it heads to its central coast, days after Typhoon Yagi set off floods and landslide that killed more than 290 people in the north. With a long coast facing the South China Sea, the Southeast Asian country is prone to tropical storms that can cause large numbers of casualties and serious damage to industrial production and properties. The depression is forecast to strengthen into a storm within the next 24 hours. The government said in a statement, as it sent a warning to coastal provinces. The storm will trigger heavy rains in central Vietnam, it said, adding that the depression is evolving in a complicated manner with possible changes in course, speed and strength. Vietnam has been reeling from the impacts of Typhoon Yagi, the strongest storm to hit Asia this year, which made landfall in its northeastern coast 10 days ago. ATN gathered that the typhoon and its subsequent floods and landslides have killed 291 people overall, with 38 others missing and nearly 2,000 people injured. the Disaster Management Agency said on Tuesday. Industrial production in several northern provinces was halted, 235,000 houses were damaged, and more than 300,000 hectares of rice and cash crops were inundated. The possible new storm would approach the central city of Da Nang late on Thursday or early on Friday, according to the weather agency. Authorities in Da Nang and neighboring Guangdong province have warned vessels at sea about the incoming depression and readied search and rescue plans, according to their disaster management departments. U.S. Navy aircrafts flew through the Taiwan Strait on Tuesday in what the U.S. called a show of commitment to free and open international airspace, prompting China to scramble fighters over a waterway it calls its own. By operating within the Taiwan Strait in accordance with international law, the United States upholds the navigational rights and freedoms of all nations, the U.S. 7th Fleet said of the P-8A Poseidon's flight. China, which claims sovereignty over democratically governed Taiwan, calls Western military transits in the area provocations. The Eastern Theater Command of China's People's Liberation Army said jets were scrambled to monitor and alert the U.S. aircraft. China, which has never renounced the use of force to bring Taiwan under its control, has over the past 5 years stepped up military activities around the island, including war games. Last week, 2 German Navy ships sailed through the Taiwan Strait in the first such transit in 2 decades. In a show of Berlin's resolve to stand with Western allies over Taiwan. Typhoon Yagi has killed over 220 people in Myanmar, with 80 others still missing. The storm, which swept through northern Vietnam, Laos, Thailand and Myanmar in September, caused severe floods and mudslides, leaving at least 226 dead and wrecking entire villages in the military government side. The UN has reported that over 500,000 people in Myanmar are in urgent need of food, water, shelter and clothes due to the destruction of hundreds of thousands of acres of crops in 9 states and regions. The civil war has been engulfed since early 2021, with thousands killed and millions forced from their homes. The army has lost control of large parts of the country, creating an unstable patchwork of governance. The storm's devastation spans 9 states and regions. That, coupled with poor communication in remote areas, has meant information about casualties has been slow to emerge. The United Nations say the floods are among the worst in Myanmar's recent history. Its disaster response agency estimated that some 630,000 people have been affected by the flooding, with blocked roads, damaged bridges, and severed communication lines, all of which have severely hampered relief efforts. Aid agencies also have little or no access to many parts of the country, including Shan State, one of the worst hit by the flooding, which is now largely controlled by a rebel army. The ruling military junta issued a rare appeal for help at the weekend, with neighboring India so far the only country to respond. It sent aid, including food, clothes and medicine. Typhoon Yagi also caused 10 deaths in Thailand and 1 in Laos. In Vietnam, the death toll stands at 292, with 38 missing, more than 230,000 homes damaged, 280,000 hectares of crops destroyed, and major manufacturing hubs heavily damaged, according to authorities. Partial evacuation has been ordered in Russia's Tver region after a massive Ukrainian drone attack sparked a fire there, the local governor said. Igor Rudenya said emergency services in the town of Toropets were trying to localize the blaze caused by failing drone wreckage. He did not say whether there were any casualties. Meanwhile, unverified footage has emerged purportedly showing a massive blast in the town amid unconfirmed reports that a weapons depot was hit overnight. On Wednesday morning, Toropets authorities said buses have already been prepared for the evacuation. They also claimed that the situation was under control in the town of about 13,000 residents. The authorities did not say how many people were being evacuated. Meanwhile, Russia's state media reported that regional schools and kindergartens would be closed on Wednesday. Overnight attacks were also reported in Russia's western Bryansk, Kursk, Oriol and Smolensk regions. Local officials said nearly 50 drones and 2 missiles were shot down. Ukraine has not commented on the reported attacks. Overnight, Ukrainian air defenses were engaged against oncoming Russian drones near the capital Kyiv city, military administration head Serhiy Popko said. There were also reports of blasts in Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy, near the Russian border. It was not immediately clear whether there were any casualties. The claims by both Russian and Ukraine officials have not been independently verified. Russian President Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. German police and prosecutors are investigating an explosion that occurred in central Cologne nearly early on Monday, a police spokesperson said, adding that there was no indication of a terrorist motive for the crime. A bystander suffered a mild injury and was brought to hospital after the explosion damaged commercial property on the Hohenzollern Ring Road, the spokesperson said. Damage was visible outside a nightclub called Vanity in the western city. The spokesperson declined to confirm a link to a series of explosions across the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in recent months that have been attributed to an organized crime gang, but said that all possibilities were being investigated. The mayor of a Polish city has asked all 44,000 residents to evacuate as widespread flooding continues to batter Central Europe. NYSA Mayor Kodian Kolbias asked people to head for higher ground, citing the risks of an embankment breaching and releasing a cascade of water into the town from a nearby lake. The death toll from the floods that hit over the weekend rose to at least 16 on Monday, with 7 confirmed fatalities in Romania. Casualties were also recorded in Austria, the Czech Republic, and Poland. Budapest has closed roads near the Danube River due to flooding risks, prompting evacuations and a call for people to evacuate their belongings. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has allocated 197 million euros for flood victims and declared a state of natural disaster. In Slovakia, the Danube River overflow caused flooding in the Old Town area of Bratislava, with water levels exceeding 9 meters and expected to rise further. The situation has stabilized in some areas, but others are bracing for more disruption and danger. Hungary is preparing for potential floods along the Danube River, with warnings in force for 500 kilometers. The river is rising by about a meter every 24 hours, and Budapest mayor has offered residents 1 million sandbags to protect against floodwaters. Tram lines will not operate and roads along the river will be closed in Budapest. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has postponed international obligations due to extreme weather conditions. The Czech Fire Service has provided drinking water to stranded villages, warning against drinking from taps or wells due to potential contamination. Austria's St. Pölten experienced more rain in 4 days than in 1950's wettest autumn. Armed forces have been deployed for storm-hit regions, and 300 million euros in recovery funds will be made available. Eastern Romania experienced flooding, causing villages and towns to submerge. Emil Dragomir, mayor of Slobozia, Konachi, described the devastating impact of the flooding as desperate. Thousands of people have been evacuated in Poland, including hospital personnel and patients. Roads have been disrupted and train traffic has been suspended in many parts of the country. In Pakko, water levels began to overflow in a nearby reservoir, endangering the town. However, in Kluksko City, water levels are now falling, and video footage shows city center streets are water-free. Ukraine said that it had asked the the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross ICRC to join humanitarian efforts in Russia's Kursk region following a cross-border incursion by Ukrainian forces. Ukraine's army remains in the Kursk region after launching an assault, claiming control of around 100 settlements. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha has instructed his ministry to invite the UN and ICRC to work in the region, stating Ukraine is ready to facilitate their work and prove its adherence to international humanitarian law. The ministry confirmed the request. The Ukrainian army is providing humanitarian aid and safe passage to civilians in the Kursk region, and invitations have been issued to the ICRC and UN to ensure basic human rights in the areas. The Ukrainian ministry has requested the International Criminal Court, ICRC, to oversee Ukraine's compliance with international humanitarian law principles as per the Geneva Conventions. Moscow has not commented on the invitations, and it is unclear whether the UN or ICRC has responded. ICRC President Marijana Spoljaric is expected to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Last week, Russian shelling killed 3 Ukrainians working for the ICRC and wounded 2 others in a village in the frontline Donetsk region. Ukrainian officials said. Spoljaric has condemned the attacks. And that's it on the international news for today. Before we go, another look at the major stories. We told you that U.S. military concludes withdrawal from junta-ruled Niger. Building collapse kills 8 in Sierra Leone. We also told you that North Carolina hits with flooding from historic rainfall. Floods and mudslides kill more than 200 in Myanmar. Former separatists take struggle to the ballot box in India. Georgian Parliament approves law curbing LGBT rights. Thank you so much for watching. That's it on the international news for today. You can follow us on all our social media platforms: X, formerly Twitter, at Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram at Atlantic TV Network. Watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. On behalf of the entire team of Atlantic Television Network, we say thank you. I am Victor Peter. Business News comes up next.
From the lines across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all the sport news, live analysis,